Washington knew that if he did not act quickly, the war would be over. He devised a plan to cross the Delaware on December 25, 1776, and attack an exposed garrison in Trenton, New Jersey, occupied by a brigade of German troops hired by the British known as Hessians. Washington crossed the Delaware on Christmas night through a blinding nor'easter and marched his tired and beleaguered army south to Trenton. The Hessians were surprised by the arrival of the Continental Army, as fighting and maneuvering troops through the winter was generally viewed as difficult and dangerous for 18th century armies. He achieved a swift victory fighting through the streets of Trenton and won his first battle as commander of the Continental Army. 9 days later, after a tactically brilliant running engagement on January 2nd, the Continental Army again achieved victory on the morning of January 3rd in Princeton, New Jersey. The 3 battles fought kept the Revolution alive in its darkest hour. In 1777, the British were desperate to regain control of the situation and launched 2 separate offensives. The British, led by Sir William Howe, captured the American capital of Philadelphia after defeating Washington at Brandywine and Germantown in the fall of 1777. While the loss of the capital was a blow to the morale of the Continental Army, the army had not fallen apart, as Howe had expected, and Washington took his forces to winter at Valley Forge, just a few miles west of Philadelphia. In upstate New York, British General John Burgoyne pushed his army south from Canada, capturing Fort Ticonderoga and hoping to sever New England from the rest of the United States in order to bring about a swift end to the war. Instead, Burgoyne faced off against Continental Generals Benedict Arnold and Horatio Gates, fighting a series of battles near Saratoga, New York. Thanks to impressive leadership by Arnold and sound strategy by Gates, Burgoyne's army was defeated and ultimately forced to surrender in October 1777. It was the largest British army to ever surrender to an enemy force to date, nearly 7,000 men. The British surrender at Saratoga, paired with the twin victories of Trenton and Princeton from the previous winter campaign, convinced the French that this new country, these United States, did indeed have a chance of winning the war. Eager to get revenge after a century of losing to the British, the French declared a formal military alliance with the United States, declaring war on Great Britain and legitimizing the Declaration of Independence in one fell swoop. Great Britain was about to become embroiled in a global conflict again. Meanwhile, Washington spent the winter of 1777 to 78 training the Continental Army to fight the way European armies did. He was aided by the help from foreign officers like the Marquis de Lafayette of France and the Baron von Steuben from Prussia. Steuben, in particular, instilled a sense of pride in the soldiers and trained them well. In 1778, when word came of the formal alliance with France, the British abandoned Philadelphia and rushed back toward New York. Their new commander, Sir Henry Clinton, did not have a high opinion of the Continental Army, but did have a healthy respect for the French, and feared their presence would trap the English in Philadelphia. Washington pounced as the British withdrew through New Jersey. His newly trained fighting force struck Clinton at Monmouth, New Jersey on June 28, 1778, and fought the British to a standstill. While the Battle of Monmouth was a stalemate, Washington's forces had fought well and withstood the British in an open field engagement. The British withdrew back to New York and would not venture into New Jersey in a meaningful way again. In 1779, the British began to feel the pressure of a global conflict. Realizing that the war could not be won in the North, the British turned their attention to the South, hoping to find more Loyalist support. British forces captured Savannah and Charleston in the fall of 1779, and soundly defeated General Horatio Gates at the Battle of Camden in South Carolina. Gates was removed from command, and one of Washington's trusted lieutenants, General Nathaniel Greene, was placed in command of the Southern Department. Greene knew that the local population was not nearly as loyalist as the British expected, and relied on the local militias and partisans to harass and harry the British supply lines. In 1780 and 1781, Greene and his other field officers lured the British away from the coast and into the Carolina backcountry, where they were soundly defeated at the Battle of Kings Mountain and Cowpens. As the British were lured further away from the Carolinas and into Virginia, the Carolinas exploded into a civil war as patriots fought loyalists for control of the states. Greene moved back into the Carolinas to recapture the states, fighting the British in a series of engagements and forcing them back to the coastal cities where they started. In the summer of 1781, Greene's army was exhausted from the near-constant fighting, as was the British army under the command of Charles Cornwallis. Cornwallis knew he could not stay in the South any longer and marched his army north toward Yorktown, Virginia. In the north, the combined American and French forces marched south to intercept Cornwallis at Yorktown. Cornwallis found himself surrounded with his back to the sea and no hope for rescue. After a month-long siege, he was forced to surrender. The surrender at Yorktown was the last major military action of the American Revolution. Peace talks opened after the surrender and took nearly 2 full years to finalize. In the end, the Treaty of Paris officially recognized the United States as a sovereign nation and was made independent and free from Great Britain. As the American Revolution raged on, the Continental Congress, having declared independence, found themselves not only with the necessity to conduct a war as a sovereign body, but to unite the now independent states in a loose confederation government. On November 15, 1777, the Congress adopted the Articles of Confederation, creating a weak central government which bound the states together only in times of great conflict, such as the ongoing Revolution. The Articles worked through the war, as they granted the Congress the power to conduct the war as a united body and deal with foreign nations as such. After the war, however, it became apparent that the loose system of central government was not going to work. Under the Articles, the state governments had direct control over their own commerce, economy, and laws. And while many of these overlapped, not all did, creating chaos and confusion. The central government could not mediate the issues between states, and disputes over state boundaries, taxation, and international trade began to push the government to its limit. The United States was less than a decade old and was already facing an economic and political disaster. One of the major indicators that change needed to be made occurred in fall 1786, when the economic situation began leading to mass foreclosures and bankruptcies. In Massachusetts, Revolutionary War veteran Daniel Shays led a rebellion of some 1,200 other veterans who had not been paid for their service nor had received a pension, and occupied the Massachusetts Supreme Court in Springfield, thereby denying the Massachusetts government the ability to foreclose on any property. They attacked the new federal arsenal at Springfield, but were unsuccessful in taking possession of the grounds. Fighting began to occur all over the state as the rebellion spread. Fortunately, the Massachusetts militia defeated the rebels, scattering them and putting an end to the fighting. It was clear the Articles of Confederation limited the federal government's ability to handle domestic issues, as well as foreign policy issues. The Treaty of Paris, which had ended the Revolution, made stipulations that debts owed by Americans to British subjects would still need to be honored, and that loyalists would still be able to bring suits to United States courts for the return of their confiscated property. As each state was liable for ensuring these terms were met, there were discrepancies across the country, as some enforced these terms better than others. The result was British troops still occupying forts and territory which now technically belonged to the United States, as the terms of the treaty had not been met. With no authority to mediate or command the states to adhere to the treaty, the federal government could do nothing. With few options, a convention was called by several states in order to make amendments to the Articles. In May 1787, the Constitutional Convention convened in Philadelphia and began debating the Articles of Confederation and what would be required to alter them. It was immediately clear that the Articles did not work. But what form of government would? A fundamentally new design was proposed and hotly debated. As would become the hallmark of American politics, several compromises were met to achieve the balance the states required to ratify this new form of government. This new constitution would form a government of checks and balances, with three distinct branches dividing the federal authority between them. The legislative branch, or the Congress, would be divided into two houses: the House of Representatives, composed of state representatives comparable to the population of each state, and the Senate, composed of two representatives from each state. This branch has the power to create and vote on laws, enact taxes, declare war, override presidential vetoes, create federal courts, except for the Supreme Court, and sets the number of justices on the Supreme Court. Independently, the Senate has the power to confirm presidential appointments to the judiciary, heads of departments and other federal offices, ratify treaties with foreign powers, remove impeached officials from office. The House of Representatives has the power to impeach federal officials, including the president. The executive branch would be led by a president, elected by an electoral college, who would be vested with the power to execute, enforce, or veto federal laws, appoint federal officers, grant pardons, and act as the primary role in all matters relating to foreign policy. As the commander-in-chief, it was also the role of the president to lead the military forces of the United States at the direction of Congress. The third branch, the judicial branch, would consist of a Supreme Court, appointed by the president and approved by the Congress. The Supreme Court is responsible for the interpretation of the laws passed by Congress and acts as the final ruling on matters of legality. In a later Supreme Court case, Marbury v. Madison, 1803, the Supreme Court added the determination of which laws of Congress are unconstitutional. While this check was not in the original Constitution, it is an essential part of the function of the court. A government by the people, for the people. It was the first time any nation's constitution had included the people as instrumental in the establishment and validity of the government. The Constitution was drafted in September 1787 and distributed to the Congress of the Confederation. Instead of the amendments to the articles they had expected, the Constitution offered an entirely new form of government. Immediate debate began as the Constitution needed to be ratified not unanimously by each state, as under the Articles of Confederation, but rather by a 2/3 majority.